Welcome to the Graybeard Chronicles podcast. Your hosts, Brian Halstead and Kevin Harkins, are two gray-bearded patriots who love God, their family and friends, and their country. The Graybeards are here to inspire, inform, and educate you on a myriad of topics they are passionate about. Brian and Kevin have a strong desire to share this with you to help you live your best life. Sit back and enjoy this amazing podcast as the Graybeards pass along the wisdom of the ages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. I'm Brian Halstead.
And I'm Kevin Harkins.
And Kevin, we're here to pass along some wisdom of the ages. What the heck does that mean?
We're not perfect, but we do have gray beards. And that means we've got some significant life experience, some life lessons, and some perspectives that are worthy of passing along.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. Let's get to it.
Kevin, good evening, sir. What is going on, man?
Good evening, Bryant. Here we are, remote again.
I know it. It's like, 2 weeks in a row. It's, I miss you, man. I miss you.
Yeah, it's not the same, but I'll tell you what, it wasn't all that long ago that we didn't have the opportunity to do these remote things because the technology wasn't there. So I'm thrilled that you are in Sedona, Arizona right now. I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and our guest Irfan are you in where, McLean, somewhere up there?
No, actually, I'm in Herndon, Kevin.
Herndon, okay.
Virginia, Northern Virginia, not too far from McLean.
Right. Okay. And this is magic. There you go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to Virginia. This climate out here, the geography is absolutely beautiful, but the air, goodness gracious, I need some moisture.
Yeah.
A little bit of humidity, yes. Always helps.
I like the dry personally, but
well, you lived out this way for a number of years, so you probably miss it to a degree.
I did, yes, I did, and I do, yes. And the desert has a beauty unlike anything else. I like the desert, the Southwest desert in the United States is gorgeous. You know, it's not sand dunes, but it's desert and it's beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, for those who are listening or watching, you now know we have an honored guest, and I mean that sincerely. We have Irfan Ali with us, and he's going to be talking about a topic that I think our listeners cannot get enough of in this day and age. All things considered, all political machinations that have gone on over the past probably 20 years. This topic, I don't think could be talked about enough. And before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about Irfan. First of all, Irfan, first and foremost, in my mind, is a friend. And thank you for that, Irfan. I appreciate that. But he's a very successful international businessman. Some of that may come up today. He was a significant player in the group that developed the Tyson's Corner, the land investment and development group, Georgialus up in Northern Virginia that did Tyson's Corner. He's currently very focused on the topic of energy. There's some great stuff out there that Irfan has written about and commented on regarding energy poverty. And that is fascinating to me because, boy, energy has just sort of dominated what are the right ways to go forward in today's day and age. All of those things are important, but this is the thing that caught my attention and made me want to invite Irfan onto the podcast, and that is because of his love of America. This man loves America, and I know because I've sat in front of a fireplace for hours and heard him talk about it as an immigrant that came to the United States, I think when you were 17, Irfan, and just what you saw, your journey, and what you see today. But the topic that we're going to cover, at least formally, and this is going to have tangents all over the place, is freedom of religion in America from the Muslim perspective. And I'm not going to get into that any more than just to kind of give the title. But Irfan, welcome. So glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. And what is your So first two things that I asked you to comment on, talk about your love for America, that you sort of, what's just comes to mind. And then tell us about this current state of affairs with respect to religion in America.
Sure. Well, Kevin and Brian, thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, I'll just dive right into it, Kevin. You may have heard some of this in the various different conversations that we've had at length.
Yeah.
About my history, my background, and but I'll share some of that for your viewers and listeners as well. So, every immigrant has their own unique journey to the United States. Pretty much everyone living in this country, other than the Native Americans, one way or another can trace their lineage back to another land. We know that,
Right.
and so there are so many layers upon layers of immigrant stories in this country and its history. But they're all pretty much unique in their own respect, circumstances, background, and things of that nature. So my journey in love for America really began even before I came to the United States, which was very interesting. And it was sort of an outcome of some circumstances, which I can get into a little bit. I won't get into too much detail, but my father was a diplomat, and he was assigned when I was a little over 6 years old, just around 7 almost, to Germany. This was in the 60s. And that was my first encounter with the Western world. Up to that point, I was, just a youngster and living in Pakistan, and spent a little bit of time in India. So my frame of reference in life really was South Asia up to that point. And I arrived in a very developed nation in Germany. And obviously that was like a significant shock to see the developed world as opposed to the struggling, developing world. So that by itself was a bit of a jarring experience for a young person. And it was in a way, fascinating as well, because the juxtaposition of poverty and richness were fully on display between the two nations. So my father, to his credit, decided to enroll me in, and not to, he was a single parent, which was very unusual back then, and especially from a Muslim country. You didn't find that to be common. So to help prevent me from struggling further with learning a new language, and I had already been in English-speaking schools, which is the norm in South Asia because of the leftover legacy of the British rule, colonial days. So everyone's pretty much bilingual. So English was, fine. So he put me in the American school on the Rhine. And that experience was very interesting for me. And I think that's frankly the seed of where my love for America began. I remember vividly my first day in school. I was called to the principal's office. It was not a big school. It was, all the embassy staff, the American embassy staff, and some diplomats and military personnel. Their kids were going to this school. I was the only non-American or non-white kid, if you will, there in that school at that time. And the principal called me on the first day to welcome me to the school. And during that meeting, he said, can you come a little bit early tomorrow morning, Irfan? Try and get here by about 10 or 15 minutes before school starts. I have a special assignment for you. So obviously, as a youngster, I was, very, enthusiastic about a special assignment from the principal. And I remember I'm coming from a very disciplinarian British type of education system at that point. So I arrived the next morning, and what he had in mind for me was to become the flag boy, of raising and then bringing down the flag during the ceremony every morning and every after school, and folding the flag appropriately. And at that time, I really didn't think too much about it as to why he picked me out of the entire school. And it dawned on me much later on that he did that to show a side of America to a foreign kid who probably had never seen what America's all about. And it was a fascinating introduction to the American culture. And so fast forward, and I'll skip the whole life story, but my father was then assigned back here to the United States, to the United Nations, when I was still just finishing college. So we came to New York, and I attended Hunter College, and spent nearly about 5 years in Manhattan, and came back to live in this area. Again, I disappeared for a while and came back to live in this area in 1980. So that is kind of the beginning of my journey to America. When I came back in my teen years, it by then had already started the realization that America has a very unique perspective on immigration, on citizens, and it's a very much a hard work meritocracy, right? I like to use that more than democracy, because democracy can sometimes get a little skewed and sort of has different connotations, different meaning to different people. But if you look at it from purely those,
yeah, we're not a pure democracy, but yeah, you're right. It can go sideways for sure.
And people sometimes co-opt democracy to suit their own, needs. And that's happened in various regimes and various moments in history. So here in America, what I found and discovered as a youngster is that the college experience, the life, the liberties, the ability to speak your mind, and just essentially the freedom was endearing. And so the love affair really continued. It wasn't, despite the years in between. I was into rock music and always influenced by all of the American influences that typically teenagers get. And so, but in a way, I think that today we are, and I think you alluded to this earlier on, we are at a very strange moment in the history of the United States, where we have the ability to lose a lot of that. I think we're kind of toying with this whole, or taking it for granted in a way, with the fundamental liberties and freedom of speech and things of that nature, and that's troubling. My hope is that enough people open up their eyes and recognize that, yeah, the American way, leave alone again democracy, the American way is a threat, under threat. And we need to find a way to collectively, the majority, I think, feel that on this, but they're quiet and they're silent. We need to find a way to stand up and reclaim those very fundamental anchors of and foundation of the foundation of the U.S. So with that, I can certainly segue into the religious aspect of it all. But I'll stop and pause if you have any sort of questions or comments on that.
I'll just comment quickly and say thank you. And I know for those who are listening, if you sit face to face with Irfan and you listen to him go into these things in more detail than we have to on a 30 or 40-minute podcast, you can see the passion, you can feel the passion, and I love that. I personally also believe that those who are wanting to highlight every bad thing that America has done in her history, that's the wrong approach. Every country has done that. But I really do believe that America, on the whole, remains that shining city on the hill overlooking the entire world. And when you look at the American political experiment that is still underway today. And it continues to evolve and grow and change, and that's fine. I mean, there's a system in place to do that, but still, it is by far unparalleled in the world. But you're right, it is under attack. Freedom is never free. You use that word, it's an important word. It's not free. It has to be supported and defended and looked out for. And we, the people, need to gather and not be so silent. And in some respects, I think it's starting to happen. But yeah, thank you for that. Brian, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I echo those same sentiments. I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and I appreciate you calling it out. The fact that so many people are still silent and are standing by and watching this literal assault on our American way of life and the freedoms that we enjoy. I think, Kevin, you mentioned that, folks are starting to wake up, and I believe that. There's so many ways out there for people to do that and share information and so on. And unfortunately, they often get shut down by the people that are controlling some of those different technologies and et cetera that they use to share that information. And at the same time, I think that you're going to start to see a difference when it comes to, who people are putting in office as elected representatives and so on, because, they've seen the evidence of what some of the choices they have made has given them. And it turns out that, their choices weren't all that great for our existence, and they see what we're experiencing now. So yeah, I would encourage, we guys like us, we have to talk to people and share that information and get folks to get out there and say stuff about it and talk to other people and take action.
Well, I think that one of the things that I'll kind of pick up on and that I alluded to earlier, which is, and you, Kevin, you're right, freedom is never free. You have to fight for it. This country was founded with that fight. I think what, unfortunately, politics in the United States has become so divided and so divisive that politicians, whether they're on the right or the left, have lost sight of the fact of what they're supposed to be there for, right?
Right.
Why were they put in that position that they're there for? And we can discuss this ad nauseum, but we all know that money has corrupted politics in a bad way, because without money, these folks can't get elected. And it's a shame that the Supreme Court in the famous Citizens United case ruled that corporations are people. I thought that was a odious ruling on the part of the Supreme Court. Because corporations are not people, and it just opened the door for corruption at the highest level. So now, if you have money, you can buy the politicians. Essentially, that's a shame. There are so many incidents in American history where you can touch those particular incidents and see the slippery slope that we've been on. Right, that was one that I just referred to. Right. The other one was where, if you go back all the way to the 60s and 70s, you had in the United States a very, I thought, a healthy system in place that used to be the check and balance on Hollywood. Right, you used to have a censor board where you would actually take out foul language, violence, and things of that nature. And Hollywood mounted an attack on that system and won through the legal battles. Again, the Supreme Court and the Justice Department failed the American people, in my view. I mean, these are just my personal opinions, obviously. But again, that started a slippery slope in terms of discord. Right, so people using foul language. Another one that you can touch upon is taking God out of, school, out of prayer, out of school, and that can lead me. I think it's a good segue into the conversation about religion and the freedom of religion in this country. So, I did a little research maybe about, I forget now how long ago, but about a year and a half ago, I was helping my dad come up with some answers to questions that he was asking. And one of the things that I stumbled upon was that they could actually trace the first Muslim immigrant to the United States back in the late 1600s. So Islam is not new in the United States. It's been here for a long time. It's relatively small in terms of percentages and size of population, but it's been here. And so, it's interesting. I should, sort of start off by saying, and Kevin, you know this, I've already mentioned this to you, I'm not a particularly religious person, never have been. I was raised in a very tolerant environment, and religion was never forced upon me in any form. But I do identify myself as a Muslim. And, which is an entirely another conversation that we could get into as to what constitutes a Muslim, right? It's like asking a Christian, what constitutes a Christian? And I think even in religion today, what has started happening is that people have started putting up litmus tests. Are you a Muslim enough? Do you say your prayers 5 times a day? Do you fast during Ramadan? And those litmus tests are absolutely anathema to the book, to the Holy Book, right? The Holy Book tells us, both in the Bible and in the Torah and in the Quran as well, these are the Abrahamic religions, that the judgment day is set aside for judgment. That, if you believe in God and you believe in this book, then no one on earth is going to be judging you. It's God that's going to be judging you. So whether I'm a Muslim, good Muslim, bad Muslim, the judgment day ultimately is where the judgment's going to happen. So for for me to turn around and say, well, you're not Muslim enough, that would be, I think, anathema to the very basis of the religion. But what has happened, sadly, is that you have fringes that have taken over these religions, right? You have fringes that have taken over because they've got louder voices, much like the politicians have taken over our discourse on the democracy and, all of the political stuff that we're seeing, cancel culture and things of that nature. In religion, you have these extreme on the left, and on the right. It's a similar situation in religion. So you have these extremists that want to pervert religion. And, Islam is not obviously unique. It gets a unique amount of attention because of some of the day before yesterday, the stabbing that took place in the UK. And, there are so many incidents like that where you have a extremist co-opting the religion in a way and using a misguided interpretation, or has been, radicalized. And the reaction in the West to that is that you paint all Muslims with that broad brush, right? Which is, okay, Islam is a extremist religion, or it's a inherently violent religion, and there could be nothing further from the truth, because it isn't. I'm sure you probably know this, but it's the fastest growing religion in the world, not because of converts, but because of birth rates in the predominantly poor countries where affluence has not yet set in. Birth rates are higher. And as a result, Islam is a very rapidly growing religion throughout the world. Even in the United States, it's the fastest growing segment of the population in the US. And 2 billion plus Muslims in the world. And very, overwhelming majority of those 2 billion plus are pursuing the same things that you and I, all your listeners and viewers, are pursuing, which is family, freedom, happiness, all of the things that the United States, to use your example, was the shining light on the hill, right, for. And the ability to practice your religion was enshrined in the founding fathers of this country as a right. And, that's something that should be held dear, and it should be understood that the non-Muslim American should take their time to understand their fellow Muslim Americans a little bit better. At the moment, they don't. It's a unfortunate situation. And I think, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, which is that because we've systematically taken prayer out of school and God out of the discussion, it's very easy now for the average individual not to be bothered. Okay, so you're a Muslim, fine, okay, whatever you want to identify yourself as. And what they don't realize is that in taking that type of an approach, they're really missing the point that there is a lot more in common between us than you realize. There is much more in common if you are a believer in a faith, and I am a believer in faith, that connects us because we're one and the same, we're human. And so taking religion, God out of the equation and prayer out of the equation has been, in my view, a significant setback for the US, and I would love to see that change. And the only way, in going back to I think what Brian was saying earlier, is that more voices and more people, young and old, start to realize that you're not going to find happiness on Facebook and Twitter. You're going to find happiness internally in your faith. And the young people are not being taught that. They're being taught that to go after more material, tangible things, and everything is, desirable because it's material.
Right.
And again, a significant loss because of the, taking religion and faith and God out of the conversation. So that, essentially is my personal view.
Okay, a couple things I want to comment on. First of all, boy, you're old school. You want prayer in schools, man, you're a dinosaur. I'm teasing about that.
Yeah, I know.
When I say that, but you're right. Here's the thing that you said to me a couple days ago when I was first talking to you about coming on and doing the podcast that really resonated with me, and I wanted to emphasize some points that you made. You are exactly correct that not all, but most Americans paint all Muslims with a broad brush, and all of you fall into the same category. And it's radical, it's violent, it is intolerant of other religions. That's what we're taught. That's what we hear. That's what we're all the time. And you said something to me that really resonated. And this, I think, is important for our listeners. Think about Christianity and all of the different denominations that exist within Christianity and how all of those different denominations actually carry out and practice their faith on a daily basis. I mean, it is all over the map, the way that this happens. People are doing it in ways that I'm a Christian, they say they're a Christian, but I see what they're doing and I'm thinking, you're crazy. Where are you getting that from? That's really radical. And so I can completely relate to Christians practice their faith in a variety of different ways, and we're not all the same. And you said to me, it's the same in the religion of Islam, that there's an entire broad spectrum of the way that you as well. But you're right, it's this fringe element that gets painted, and all we hear is, and actually I would like you to address this specifically. We are taught, I would say we generally, when I say we Americans are taught about Islam, that Muslims are intolerant of another religion. If you are not going to be a Muslim and practice Islam, then you are not to be tolerated. And in fact, we might declare jihad against you and try to take you out. That's what many Americans believe about it. And can you address that?
Yeah, so Kevin, that's a great question, and I'm glad that you brought it up. So let me back up to what you said earlier about the individual and granularity of individual choice and religion, right? So the loudest voices always get the most attention. We know that, right? So, and religion is not any different. So if you look at the United States, evangelicals are out there preaching left and right. So sometimes really questionable things are being said, right? And in Islam, that's not any different. You have these mullahs who will, take a young mind, an impressionable mind, and fill that mind with all sorts of garbage, right? Literally garbage, stuff that doesn't appear anywhere in the Sunnah, which is the sayings and the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Muhammad, and in the Quran. If you look at the Quran and read through it, and I've read, the Quran obviously many, many times, and I've read the Bible. I've even taken time to read parts, not all of it, the Old Testament, the Torah, because I'm curious, more out of curiosity than anything else. I'm not a very religious person, but I just wanted to say, for me, these are historical books, right? They frame civilization, they frame history, starting, with Christ, even before Christ, Abraham, and then onwards. And if you trace all of that back down, and I'm getting to your question here in a minute, if you trace all of that down to what these extreme elements are doing to all religions, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, it is actually an anathema to those religions. It's an insult to those religions, because those religions basically were off the time, and there were circumstances, historic circumstances that, in my view, God was addressing in the best way he thought at that time that man and human beings could understand.
Right.
And what was the common thread? The common thread was be kind, be gentle, be human, help one another. All of those things were being taught in these religions. And Islam was not any different. In fact, if you read the Quran, you'll see again and again, repetition after repetition of how you have to have charity, how you have to help one another. So going back to your question about jihad. So this is a term which is very badly abused in the United States and Western media in general.
Okay.
Jihad means literally in Arabic, struggle, right? If you translate jihad into English, the closest translation is struggle. So the Quran, it encourages the Muslim, the reader of the Quran, to embrace struggle, because life is a struggle. That's the whole, it kind of comes down to and distills down to being a struggle. The Quran is not trying to paint a rosy picture about what life is and what it shouldn't be and should be. Certainly there's a lot of that in the Quran, of guidance and telling you, how you should conduct your life. But I think the bottom line is that it's straightforward and honest, and tells you that it is a struggle, and jihad is your duty, that you struggle with courage and take on life's struggles, right? So what extremists have done is saying, okay, so we will kill infidels because that's part of our jihad. And who's an infidel? It's entirely up to them. It's their definition. The Quran doesn't say that a Christian is an infidel. It doesn't. In fact, I'm sure you have heard this before, that one of the people in the Quran that is revered the most is the Virgin Mary, right? The whole concept of Mary having Jesus is right there in the Quran. And Jesus is revered in the Quran as a prophet. All of the prophets are recognized. Moses is recognized, Abraham, of course, and his progeny and all of that. So as you come down from that and come to the Quran, fascinating to me that I hear this word about jihad and you're trying to kill infidels, and it's not at all true. In fact, the Prophet himself encouraged and urged his followers in Medina when he left Mecca. So a part of the quick history on Prophet Muhammad. So when he had the revelation with in the cave and Angel Gabriel appeared in front of him, he was illiterate. And the angel ordered him, and this was the vision that he later came down from the hills and the mountains to share with his wife and other followers. And Gabriel instructed him to start writing. And he said, I don't know how to write, because he was illiterate. Right. Prophet Muhammad was not educated and was not literate. He used to work in a caravan. He was already an orphan, and so there were a variety of circumstances. And Gabriel said, "That's all right. Here's a tablet, and here's a quilt, and start writing." And he wrote the first verses of the Quran and brought them down with him, right? So that's the folklore, that's the belief that we have as Muslims as to how this whole process started. And if you look at this whole concept of what happened when he came back down to Mecca, which is where he was born and raised, the people of Mecca started attacking him for this heresy because they believed in idols. Mecca itself, where today stands the famous, square with the black draping on it in the center of Mecca, that used to be full of idols. And that was what people were worshiping back then. So he literally was under threat while he was in Mecca. So he decided to move to Medina. And he took some of his family and small gathering of followers with him to Medina, which is not too far from Mecca. The people that actually gave him sanctuary were the Jews of Medina. Not only did they give him sanctuary, they protected him, and he instructed his followers to be very respectful of the customs of the Jews. And he revered the Jews as being the original enlightened, right? This is how he viewed the Jewish people. So for us to think that there was some instruction from the prophet of the religion to carry out a jihad against the Jews or against the Christians, it's all nonsense. It's again, mullahs and extremists will usurp any one or two sort of verses of the Quran to suit their needs, and it's unfortunate. But then preachers of the Bible do the same thing. We know that.
Right.
So
that is in a nutshell.
I know, we started off talking about how, the Muslim religion is viewed in America. Can you share with us maybe some personal experiences, how you yourself or your family, folks that have been negatively impacted or treated in America because of your religion? Have you had those experiences?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that, Brian, and this is one of the reasons why I love America. I've never felt discriminated against personally because of my religion or even my ethnicity, frankly, which is, isn't to say it doesn't exist. It's there for sure. There are pockets of discrimination pretty much everywhere. I'm sure you get a little bit of that too, because you have a beard and you're a tattooed person and you ride bikes. So, people look at you in a kind of curious way. So to answer your question, I've never felt that. Nobody in my family has felt that. But where we do feel it is in the media, right? It's how we're portrayed. It's how the op-eds come out, how the discourse in the public square is done. And, it's almost self-fulfilling type of a cycle, right? It's much like, the new thing that we're seeing and experiencing now, which is this whole critical race theory and discrimination that's going on at the moment. even if it doesn't exist, let's make an issue out of it, because of course it helps sell the news, and it helps, create another point of contention that they can, peddle in the system. And it's kind of disturbing.
Right.
But again, going back to what you, I think, said earlier about the technology, I think we're getting there, where people are going to bypass a lot of that nonsense and start talking like we're talking, and hopefully get the word out and say, ignore all of that nonsense and ignore that noise, because at the end of the day, we're all essentially trying to achieve the same thing: a happy life, a fulfilling life, right?
Yes, indeed.
Hey, Irfan, I know Irfan told us before we got started that he's got a hard stop, and we're kind of bumping up against it. And one of the things that I like to do, Irfan, Bryant as well, we like to just kind of have these little summary takeaways. And I'll tell you what I've gotten out of this conversation. And by the way, we will have you back for more on other topics, because I know you're a font of knowledge, because I've experienced it personally. But so the first thing is, America is a great country, and it should be fought for. It should be defended, and people should stand up and not listen to the voices on the fringe and believe that they're the mainstream. They're not, and don't allow ourselves to get pushed around. And the second takeaway is, and it's one of the things that I love about America, and you're right, it's written into our founding documents: freedom of religion, no matter what it is.
Right.
Live and let live. So long as we are all peacefully coexisting within a common American culture and a common American body of law that was voted on by the people and put into place, as long as you're not violating those, you practice your religion in any way that you want to. We live and let live, and we allow that to happen. That's the way we coexist peacefully, accepting people for who they are, knowing that every major religion in the world has the same foundational, fundamental elements to it: love, compassion, kindness, taking care of your family. All of those kinds of things are a part of it. And that's what we get out. And that's what I think the listeners should carry away. So those are my takeaways. And I very much appreciate your time with us today.
Well, Kevin, I have a few more minutes. I bumped Maria, my mom's caretaker, back a little bit, so I can spend a little bit more time.
Great.
But one of the things that I will tell you, what you just said, that I'll add to that, is that America is also a very generous nation, right? They give a lot. I mean, it's not just the government giving USAID projects here and there. People in America give a lot individually. And one of the things that I have shared with friends of mine, and they get a little surprised by this, I come from a country that's also very generous, Pakistan, right? For one of the poorest countries in the world, it ranks number 3 or 4 by the United Nations in giving.
Wow.
So individuals in Pakistan, because they have in Islam a thing called zakat. Zakat is the equivalent of a tax, a voluntary tax. Okay, it's Z-A-K-A-T. And every Muslim has a duty to give zakat. Pakistanis take that very, very seriously, no matter what level of the income bracket they may be in. Some of the poorest people, let's say a flood comes to Karachi and all the streets are flooded and the cars are stuck in the middle because there is no sewer system, or the water is not disappearing. You'll see shopkeepers leaving their shops, wading through the water to bring bottled water to the people in the car. That to them is a form of zakat, helping one another. So going back to what you were saying, that is what America is. America needs to re-engage with that spirit in a very, very big way and start cutting out all this noise that we hear from the media and from the pundits in the media, because they're spinning stuff which is not American.
Right.
And it doesn't suit this country well. And you're right, it's worth defending, it's worth fighting for. And I think we all need to be mindful that generosity comes from a fundamental belief. And that goes back again to religion and goes back again to spirituality, right? Even Native Americans who may not have a Judeo-Christian or an Abrahamic religion, they have that faith, that spirit of giving, and of, they even in 1600s when Captain James came up and down the James River, and the natives there accepted them with open arms. They gave them food, they gave them hospitality, and so it's seeped into the culture of this nation. And I think that we're unfortunately we've veered away from that a little bit, and we need to get back for sure.
Yeah, and I love, one of the big takeaways for me is and Kevin and I say this numerous times in many different ways about the importance of your search for happiness and well-being and contentment and so on needs to be right here. Yep. It comes from within, and so many people look for it by trying to acquire external means or engage in certain activities. And yeah, it starts right here. And that person looking back at you in the mirror every day is your source of happiness, and that's where it's got to start. So
absolutely. And I mean, if you go back to even some of the earliest skeptics of religion, I mean, you can go back and read Descartes, or you can read Spinoza, or any of these religious philosophers, or anti-religious philosophers, if you will. Christianity also started the slide down because of what Kevin was talking about, because it became fractured, right? And the Catholic Church became too powerful, became like a royalty. Protestants left and said, we don't want any of that. And so then the Protestants started fracturing, and but they lost sight, Brian, as you said, of what was fundamentally the most important part of that, which was seek happiness, be good to one another, be kind, be gentle, and be humble. Those are the things and qualities that we discarded in favor of the chase for the material, the chase for something that's really, to your point, a lot less meaningful. And I think if we can get back to that old-fashioned, if you will, way of thinking, and get our young people to understand that there is, take a little rest, give a little time away from the computer, away from the digital stuff, and focus on a little bit of spirit, whatever it may be. I think the whole country would be a lot better.
Indeed.
Yeah, so I have one last question, just staying focused on the subject of religion. What one thing, if you could only communicate one thing about your religion to the public as a whole, what would you want them to know about the Muslim religion?
Oh, that's a tough question in a way, because there are so many good things to point to. But the one thing that I would say is that Islam itself is even the meaning of the word, it's all about love. It's all about peace. It's about being kind. Those are the things that Islam stands for. So that's what I love about Islam, and why I still consider myself, despite all of these things that I've read throughout my life. In fact, as I get older, frankly, I get closer to that spirituality of Islam, because you realize that, of course, your mortality starts creeping up on you. That age is kind of staring you in the face, and everyone goes through this at one point or the other. And I feel sorry for those that don't have the faith, in a way, because they don't have anything to anchor, and they believe that this is it. An atheist, and I was telling Kevin this, I think, in a conversation that we had. I've had debates with lots of atheists, very smart, scientific background and all of that. But they get stumped with if you start asking them questions, starting with the Big Bang. Okay, how did the Big Bang happen? Why did it happen? Wasn't there an event before that? Because the thing doesn't explode by itself. Some energy has to come from somewhere to make it explode.
Right.
But if you go forward from that, and this is something very interesting about Islam, there's a lot of mathematics in Islam, which people don't really know. There's very elegant mathematics built into the verses of the chapters of the Quran. But going back to the point that you kind of triggered in my mind, is that if you look at these conversations that I had with the atheists, where they really show how man has become so full of hubris that they tend to think that, why I think there are so many technologists and scientists that are atheists is because they have now bought into the fact that they know so much, they've got so much knowledge, they don't really need faith, or they don't have to believe in a God. And the typical, sort of pushback that I get from a lot of them is that, well, if there was this omniscient and omnipotent God, why is it babies die, and why is there disease, etc.? And that's such a meaningless argument, because there is what I tend to do is turn it back on them and say, okay, so if you think that there is no greater force at play, how is it that you we as human beings are able to come up with things like algorithms, and these algorithms can predict what I'm about to enter into a Google search? And if I as a human being can program that, are you saying to me that there isn't a more intelligent life in the universe that is capable of doing that and 10 times more, or even unimaginably more than what we're doing here on this earth? And so the question really, it has to go back, to your question about Islam. Islam gives me that comfort that it doesn't, the Quran is not trying to sort of set you up to be into a mode of, because I've seen Christianity up close. I was married to a Roman Catholic. Both my kids were born to an Italian wife. And when they were born, in Italy, when we went to Italy, my former wife wanted to get them baptized, and the church refused to baptize them because the father was a Muslim. So you start to think about these rituals. In Islam, all you have to do is recite the kalma 3 times, and you can declare yourself a Muslim, and you're a Muslim. So in Islam, there is no there isn't any hierarchy. There isn't any clergy per se. And the people will find that surprising because they hear about these mullahs. These mullahs are not ordained in any way. They just set themselves up to be community leaders of the religion. But really, at the end of the day, they do not possess any more knowledge or right or status than an ordinary Muslim.
Goodness, I didn't know that.
There is no clergy in Islam.
And so there's no formal training in the doctrine of the faith of Islam that they have to, work themselves through to get ordained.
No. So each Muslim there are 5 pillars of Islam. And as a Muslim, you are encouraged and urged to follow those 5 pillars of Islam: fasting, tawheed, saying your prayers, reading the Quran, giving alms, which is the zakat. Those are the pillars. But no, there are no instructions. Read the Quran. It says it all right there. So I don't have to go to a mullah to become a Muslim. I just pick up the Quran and read my kalma, and I declare myself a Muslim. And that's one of the reasons why you see a lot of conversions taking place in Europe and even in America, voluntary conversions, because people kind of discovering these various different, aspects of Islam had the completely wrong, perspective. And so, yeah, it's a very welcoming and open religion. And if I talk to a Muslim, by the way, they're never looking at me and saying, you're not Muslim enough. Or 99% of the people are very, laid back about their religion. And they're not trying to impose their views on anyone. It's that little 1% fringe that, like any religion, that gives it a bad name.
So I think one of those 5 requirements, as I recall, is that at some point in your life you have to visit Mecca. Isn't that one of them?
That's Hajj.
Hajj. Okay. How do you say that? I want to make sure I'm saying that right.
H-A-A-G, Hajj, H-A-A-J, Hajj.
Okay. Have you done that? Have you been to Mecca?
No, not yet.
All
not
right.
yet. My mom, my relatives have, but I have not yet.
Okay.
But I will go one day for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go with you.
Okay. You may have to
say
say the kalma and declare yourself a Muslim if you're going to go, because that's what it's open to Muslims.
Oh, okay.
It's reserved for Muslims.
Okay, got it. Didn't know that either.
There is that little, and that's really, it's interesting that they did that, because there's a very obscure verse in the Quran that I think, personally, my view is that it was misinterpreted. That the Mecca was the prayer for the location for Hajj for all Muslims. So they've taken that and converted that to only Muslims. And it's an interpretation issue, but that's the way the Saudi government takes it. But again, there's not, if you declare yourself a Muslim, you're welcome to go and do your Hajj.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
Another thing that jumped out at me that I want to call attention to is the conversation about how folks will tend to paint with a broad brush, right? So painting the Muslim religion with a broad brush. I think it goes way beyond that. I think that's a societal thing that we just have kind of gravitated towards doing in general about anything. Putting people in a bucket and just painting them with a broad brush that they're all the same. Whether we're talking about religion, or we're talking about, 50-year-old white males, or we're talking about, whoever, Trump supporters, or, you just broad brush them all. I think
Brian, I think it's interesting you say that, and you're right, 100% right. There is one caveat to what you just said about Muslims, right? And it kind of began with 9/11. If you kind of go back, because again, we talk about trigger points, right? So if you look at 9/11 and the war on terror that was unleashed by Bush, and I'm a big believer that this country has also another trigger point that we haven't discussed, and we can leave for another day, is how in the United States we have given up so much control to decisions like war to the establishment, right? So you've got this big military complex machine that just has to feed itself. It's voracious. I mean, we know that. All you have to do is drive around the Beltway here, and you know how many of these buildings are housed with, defense-related contractors who are feeding off of this machine. And so after 9/11, great, let's go in, bomb the heck out of Tora Bora, and get Osama bin Laden. Those are good targets. But then to follow that up and start an invasion of Iraq and an invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, where literally in Iraq, there have been, by some estimates, over 1.5 million people, innocent people, that died during the invasion of Iran, during that whole period of the war. That's a lot of people. And in Afghanistan, of course, we've had casualties, civilian casualties, that never get fully accounted for. So when you look at that, going back to your point, it's a little different than broad brush stroking, that goes on without doubt on people that are conservative or different here in the United States, whether it's white men now coming under attack because they're white privilege or whatever the case, which is nonsense. But the point I'm getting at is that Muslims, what doesn't get talked about is that if you look at from a historic perspective, right? And I get into trouble for saying this, but I say it anyway. I don't care. The one-sided support that the United States gives blindly to Israel, starting from 1948 till today, has created more chaos, more problems, more difficulty for the United States than perhaps any other one single issue. By far.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And by that, what I mean is that there are Palestinian people, if you go back and look at the history of the occupation of Palestine, which is what it was a protectorate of the British Empire. They declared the Balfour Declaration, essentially in 1947, said that we are going to create a state for the Jews and carve it out of Jerusalem, right, which was Palestine, which was at that time Palestine. There were 700,000 Palestinians living in that territory at that time, and perhaps as many as 4,000 to 5,000 Jews. These are, statistics that are freely available even on the United Nations archives and records. Okay, so what they did was they went in there. When I say they, this is the Allies, the British, the Americans, fully complacent, and removed the Palestinians from their homes. Many of them were killed, their homes were burned, and they literally evacuated them from there to create this home for the big exodus of European Jews who came and settled now in Palestine, right, which became Israel. All right, I do not begrudge any Jew wanting to live peacefully and in freedom wherever they are. They shouldn't be persecuted no matter where they are. Nobody should be persecuted for their religion. But therein lies the rub. So why are you persecuting the Palestinians? Why are they in quasi-concentration camps in Gaza and on the West Bank, pretty much? They can't get their own supply of water. They can't get without getting Israeli permission. That's not the kind of condition that people want to be living in. So does that feed resentment in the Muslim community? Absolutely it does. But it doesn't want to be, people here in this country do not want to talk about that, particularly the media or the politicians on both sides, Republican and Democrat. They would much rather all of us just forget all about that. In fact, there are some countries in Europe that have in their constitution added, Germany is an example, added in their constitution the right for Israel to exist. That's in their constitution. What about the Palestinians? Do they have a right to exist?
Yeah.
So, going back to your point, you're right, broad brushing, but, Muslims have this, how do I put it in a sort of a way that's not, outrageously incorrect, politically incorrect. But the reality is that, and I know for someone like me to be saying that, immediately the reaction that you get back from Jewish folks is that you're painted as anti-Semite. There is no such thing as being anti-Semite when you're talking about Israel. It's more anti-Zionism because, again, going back to the evangelicals, and we talk about religion, evangelicals believe again, these are fractions within the evangelical community, that until Israel doesn't have from sea to shining sea control over that whole Judea, the Christ is not going to come back. That's the belief that many of these evangelicals have. So they give blindly their support to Israel, so that the Jews need to control ultimately, and Jesus will come back. And, the problem with that is that you have the suppression of these people, literally millions of these people, called the Palestinians, to accomplish that. And that really does generate a lot of resentment in the Muslim world. I don't know if that's helpful, but I thought I'd throw that in there.
No, it's absolutely helpful. I'm intrigued by everything you've said. I greatly appreciate you sharing this information, and certainly has my wheels turning and kicking in a desire for me to learn more.
Well, I appreciate the time. I think I do definitely need to get back, and we'll pick this up again at some point.
Irfan, thank you for your time very much. Thank you for your thoughts. And you started to you got to going. And I love that. I love that. I think as we all exchange these ideas, we all grow and learn and get better. And that's the whole purpose of the podcast. Passing on the wisdom of the ages. And
amen.
There was plenty of it shared this evening, no doubt.
Right.
Well, appreciate my pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.
Take care, guys.
All right. Take care.
Yeah. And Brian, are we gonna do the sign off?
I might be able to just pull that. I'm gonna stop the recording. No, you know what? No, I'm not gonna stop the recording. Yeah, let's do it. Let's see if we can do it.
Let's do it.
The technology thing always jacks us up. But man,
That's
what a great conversation with Irfan. Thank you so much for inviting him on the podcast. And man, I want to talk to him more. Wealth of knowledge. So yeah, he's got my gears turning up here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. You can just wind him up and let him talk. And yeah, it's just part of it. When I talk to Irfan, for me is how little I know about world history, about world religions, about the impact of things. I mean, just we tend to be so insular in our own little worlds here in America. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And it's very refreshing to be exposed to a bigger, broader perspective. I love that. Yeah,
no doubt. Yeah, I mean, he's rattling off things that, I'm not aware of. I'm thinking, man, I need to know more about these things. Right. Because it informs, why people do what they do, why they think the way they think. There's a lot of good information out there that, we might wrongly, see someone because of our incorrect perception of why they're doing what they're doing or saying what they're saying. All because of, you don't know what you don't know.
Right. That's it. Anyway, I'm good.
I enjoyed it, and I appreciate you inviting him, and I look forward to more conversations with him.
You bet.
To do what you talked about doing, and so that we do have our traditional sign off, I will say this: no matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing, make sure between this podcast and the next, you take time to enjoy the ride.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. Please subscribe so you'll receive notification when new episodes are available. To learn more about the Graybeards, visit their website, graybeardchronicles.com.